Hi, what's up? Hello, my name is Liz, and you're watching For Booking Out Loud. So today we're going over my January wrap-up, and if I'm gonna be honest, I've been putting this video off, well, let's just say a week at this point. It wasn't a bad reading month per se, but I was definitely in a reading type slump for the majority of the month. And so I did read a good amount of books because I'm a fast reader, but at the same time, I don't know. I think my mood just brought a lot of the books down, and I might have to reread some of them later. But we are going to film this. I am determined to get this done today. And in fact, to make me feel even more comfy, I have my comfy clothes on. I have my tea. And we're just gonna get through this. Stick with me here, okay? So for the stats, let's just go over stats first. Started using a pretty complicated spreadsheet this year. I blame Sunny from Sunny Luca. Let's just get that out of the way. I'm on to you. But this month I've read 24 books. So a little less than what I usually read. Yeah, a little less. But out of those books, I read 6 nonfiction, 2 science fiction, 3 fantasy, 3 horror, 1 thriller, 1 historical fiction, 2 classics, 1 contemporary fiction, I guess, 2 romances, and 2 mysteries. Did I say mystery twice? No, we're good. We're good. And let's see what more I have. I was able to finish 13 of my physical books. I read 8 ebooks and then 2 audios. My page length in itself, a majority of my books were in the 300 to 400 range, as you can see from a graph that I'm going to put somewhere on my head. But I did end up reading a pretty hefty book that was like 850 pages. What can I say? And then finally, for my ratings, I had a ton of 4-star books. Like I said, I think if it was a different month, I might have rated a lot of these books differently because it's a different month, go figure. But at the same time, I don't know. It was a weird month, but my ratings are there and we shall talk about each book. So for this one, I'm just gonna go into chronological order of the books that I read because it's a little easier on my beautiful spreadsheet down here. And I'm just gonna talk to them. If I have something to say, it might be a little longer. If I don't have that much to say, you know. And then again, I will try to timestamp everything so we can just get into this. All right. Starting with the first book I read, it was Crime and Punishment. And I believe that was, Crime and Punishment. And it was an audiobook that I've been trying to read for basically all of December, and I finally was able to finish it as my first book in January. And it was all right. I mean, I gave it, where is it? I gave it a 2-star. It's a very long book, and I don't know if Russian literature is it for me. I'm just gonna point that out. So I could see people really enjoying it, and clearly it is a go-to and a classic for a reason, but it's just not my book, not the one that I would pick on a usual day. And then the second book I finished was actually To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. And this is his first book as an adult, and it's a really hefty sci-fi. I will admit, when I picked up this book, I didn't realize how thin the pages were. And this one was the, what, 870 plus page. Yeah. But 870 pages-ish for this book. And I have to admit, there were parts of it that I really, really enjoyed. This book was something I haven't read before. It is a first contact type of book. And of course, I'm not going to say they're similar at all, but I love Firefly, the TV show. And this book had a lot of maybe echoes of it, or maybe I just like space sci-fi and first contact kind of things. But I ended up giving this book, where are you? I am having trouble with this spreadsheet. I gave this book a 4-star. It wasn't the best book I've ever read, and there were certainly times where I thought the explanations went on a bit long, or maybe the book was just a little wordy. But at the same time, I don't see Christopher Paolini deleting those scenes or deleting those explanations, because they are truly necessary for the book. I would recommend it if you like sci-fi, knowing that it's a very large read and it is a commitment. So that was number 2. Let's put this guy right there. And then number 3 is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. And I loved Station 11 by her. That was absolutely phenomenal. And The Glass Hotel, it was kind of like a mystery, but not. And then it had some weird aspects to it. And it just bored me kind of, maybe not even halfway through, maybe a third through. And I was really disappointed, because I know that this, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the book that she wrote after Station 11. And again, don't get me wrong, her writing is beautiful, but that book just wasn't my thing, I guess. And then I did a reread of Under Heaven by Gavriel K. And I actually read this book years and years ago, and I love it so, so much. It is a historical fiction book on, what was it, the Tang Dynasty? Ha! I was right. It's a historical fiction book on the Tang Dynasty. And this, I guess, rebellion that started, but it doesn't focus on the rebellion. It's a lot of like the steps before this rebellion and why it was so significant. And it really follows the main character when he comes back from his mourning period, from mourning his father and burying a whole bunch of skeletons at his father's famous battle. I will say there is some fantasy in this book. There's a lot of fantastical things, I guess you could say. I personally enjoy it. It is a fiction, and I have to take it as a fiction, and therefore add some fantasy. Why not? And Kay is an absolutely beautiful writer. I've read this book and Tiga? It's the one that starts with a T, and El Razan. I forgot that. I've also read El Razan. And all those books are absolutely phenomenal. This one has definitely convinced me that I need to look into more of his work and just maybe do a reread of the ones that I have read. But I read this one mostly because I want to read the sequel, I guess. The other one that's in this world, basically, that takes place 800 years after that. Under a Sea of Stars? No, that was the other book. I'll put it like right here, the sequel. And so, very happy I reread it. Not a bad plan on my part. All right, number 5. Wow, we're already 5. Let's get through this, yes. I ended up reading The Skeleton Crew by Stephen King, and this is a series of short stories, and they were fine. I mean, if I go back to it, oh yeah, this is the one with the mist in it. There's a ton of short stories in this book, considering it is a little bit smaller than what he usually has for short stories, at least when he was older. Not older, he's older now. At least when he was younger. I can do the math. But out of this book, I really enjoyed The Mist, The Monkey, Paranoid a Chant, Word Processor of the Gods, For Owen, Survivor Type, and The Ballad of the Flexible Bullet. If I'm going to be honest, the one that really surprised me the most is the short story named For Owen. If you don't know, Owen is one of his sons, and he wrote this, I guess it would be more long verse for his son. And I thought that was really touching, and I just really enjoyed it. And that was Skeleton Key. I would recommend this short story collection. Just gonna point that out there. Not my favorite by him. I would say that would be probably Different Seasons right now, but still a good book to pick up. All right, and then the next book I read was Pure Drivel by Steve Martin. Yeah, did not like this one at all. It was a novella. He wrote it as like a series of autobiographical essays. I don't recommend it. Don't pick it up. Don't buy it. Don't rent it. Just leave it where it is. That's my plan. All right, and then I started getting into Taylor Jenkins Reid. I honestly, after I finished The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I pre-ordered all of her work on my library, and this was the first one I got to this month, and that was Maybe in Another Life. As you can tell, I loved it so much I ended up getting a physical copy, but it is about a girl. This one's Hannah. Yes, this is about Hannah, who is always thinking about destiny, predestined, future type S things. And what's interesting about this book in particular is that at a very early point in the book, it basically splits the plot in two, and it follows Hannah if she made one decision, and it follows Hannah if she would make a different decision. I loved this book throughout the whole thing. It wasn't a love triangle, even though she ends up with two different guys. It was truly just a fact of destiny is what you make of it, and kind of how to continue on your life, even if it's not what you planned out for your life. And this theme really, I feel like a lot of her work revolves around that, and it was honestly a romance. It was like two romance stories in one book, and I love a 2-for-1. So if you like romance, I would highly suggest it. Or if you like Taylor Jenkins Reid's, great book. All right, and then we have Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I really, really enjoyed this book. I came at it thinking it was about something completely different than what it actually was, and I'm actually really happy about that. It's about this boarding school for girls on this really remote Maine island, and all of a sudden this disease had appeared, making the girls either die, be in pain, get some crazy mutations. And it actually takes place 3 years after the disease started. And so it has this sense of mystery. It does have some horror aspects. You don't get to the horror until like halfway or 2/3 through the book. So there's that. And it was just really interesting and almost a different take on like a disease, end of days kind of thing, but in a very small contained area. I liked it. What did I give it? I gave it a 4. So yes, I liked it. And I'm just glad I read it. Okay, so the 9th book I read is Humans of New York by Brandon Stanton. And it's actually a book based off of the Facebook and Instagram stories that he does, pictures that he posts. But it was published in 2013, I believe. But it's just, if you're familiar with Humans of New York, you know that you have a picture, and a lot of times you also have like some type of interview that goes with it. It was just a really beautiful book, and honestly, I think he takes some great pictures of people. So it was a fun read for me. Let's not. There we go. Sorry, I needed to take a break before we talked about the next book. And that would be the second audio I read this past month. And it's Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. I don't know what else I can say about it. I believe I talked about it in a vlog that I did. And if I did, I'll post it above and below, like always. But a lot of people have read it, and they have also expressed their severe disappointment at this book. And again, this is knowing that the sequel wasn't planned, he didn't have to do it, and it's truly just a money grab for him. And so you go into the book with your expectations very low, and then they just it's almost disappointing how disappointing this book is. Like a surprising amount of disappointment. And I thought the book was doing all right, like not good, not a recommendation at all, until I got to the last chapter, and it completely ruined any saving qualities the book had. Yeah. Let's just continue. There's nothing more that needs to be said about Ready Player 2 at this point. Don't read it, don't pick it up. Ready Player 1 is a standalone novel. Point blank. The next book I read then was The Grimm's Fairy Tales. And I had gotten a beautiful recommendation in my comments that this book is really easy to read if you just read a couple of fairy tales at night before you go to bed or just during the day. And that's what I tried to do. And then eventually the stories just kept repeating and repeating, and I felt like there was nothing truly new about the stories. Don't get me wrong, they're good. Children's horrific fairy tales. And I'm glad I read them, but at the same time, I don't think I would ever recommend this book to anyone, nor read to like my future kids or anything. What did I give it? Ooh, I did give it a 3. So like I said, it was all right, but just as an FYI. And then I ended up reading How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. Let's just get this out of the way. Did not like it. I thought it was really boring and kind of a little pretentious at times too. I mean, she's trying to explain how to live your life to the fullest without expectations weighing you down. But it was something. It was something, I'll give it that. I don't know if I'm glad that I read it. I didn't really get anything out of it. I gave it a 2.5 because I know a lot of people really do enjoy it, but I did not. Oh, okay. Now I'm excited. So the next book I read was Ring Shout, and this is a novella about, well, it's a novella, it's historical fiction, and it's about the idea on if the KKK clan had, or if the KKK was monsters that could be slayed. And it follows this one girl who is killing off the monstrosity that is the KKK, adding kind of like a sci-fi twist, I guess, if monsters are sci-fi. I don't know. But it was really good. I really loved how this author turned the story on its head, giving more power to the people that were oppressed by the KKK, killed, tortured, horrific things. And it is still a horror, but again, switched. And it was just a very, I don't know if I'd call it refreshing, but it was a really cool idea, and I'm really glad I read it. And then we have Survival Math. Where is it? There we go. Survival Math by Michell S. Jackson. And I've been wanting to pick up this book for a really long time, partly because I know he lives in Portland, or lived, he grew up in Portland, and that's the city that I'm next to. But what I really truly appreciated about this book is the personal stories outside of the author's scope. He did interviews with relatives, friends, and that's who all these people are. And it just tells a day in the life of a Black man in Portland. And it just brings to life their lives. And I truly appreciated that. It is a series of essays. Yeah, I guess I would put them as essays that also intertwines with his life, the author's life, Jackson's life. So I thought it was really good, and I would recommend this to anyone who wants to read a book like this, basically. So the next book I read was After I Do, again by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read a lot of her books this month. And this is about a story, or this is another romance, but in this case, it's about a wife and a husband who have been together for years, and they've just grown apart. They don't want to get a divorce, but they decide to basically live a year not husband and wife, to try to see if they could still love each other, if a life after the other person is better. And it was an interesting take, because the romance itself was very subtle, and it's more like the progression. What does love develop into? How can you keep your love strong? And when do you call it quits on a relationship? I enjoyed it. Not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book by far, but a really good romance in my opinion. All right, so the next book I did end up reading is Brandon Stanton's other book called Humans. So after he wrote Humans of New York, he got really popular, blah, blah, blah. He now travels the world doing the same thing he did in New York, where he takes pictures of people and interviews them. And so again, it's that same beautiful format. You have a picture and then part of the interview that he found most striking. And I would say this book is even more beautiful than Humans of New York. The pictures are better, the stories are incredible, again, words. And I just highly suggest it, especially if you like photography, if you like real life stories. It's great. Boop, boop. Okay, stack of books. Ooh, okay, the next one is The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. And this book was awesome. I really enjoyed it. It really surprised me how much I enjoyed it. Ruth Ware is kind of a hit or a miss for me. I've liked a lot of her books, and then I really didn't like a lot of her books. I guess a couple. She hasn't written a lot. I digress. But The Lying Game is about 4 friends that, when they were young in boarding school. What is with boarding school? I just realized I read a lot of boarding school type books recently. Anyway, so these 4 girls are friends, and when they were in boarding school, they played what they called the lying game, and you got so many points for like a good lie, you got so many points for people actually believing you, so on and so forth. But the looming thing in this book is that something happened. They only went to school with each other for a semester, and the result of something that happened has been ruining their lives, or at least hanging over them for years and years. And so you have this mystery of what is this thing that they did? Was it horrific? Who did it? And ultimately, I loved the ending. I thought Ruth Ware really wrapped up this book beautifully, and I was very, very satisfied, even though I would say about halfway through, or maybe 2/3 through, I found it, I guess the ending, or I guess the whodunit kind of thing. But the ending, it was beautiful, point blank. Oh, okay. The next book that I read was Robinson Crusoe. I ended up DNFing this book. It was just not for me. He's an interesting book. I love the concept, the idea that a man is stranded on a remote island for years upon years, and he has to pull himself up by its bootstraps to get going. Sorry. But the idea to me is great, and there's been a lot of adaptations. There's been a lot of adaptations of this concept, and so I really was hoping that the original would be good. The style wasn't for me. Point blank, I did not like reading an ongoing internal dialogue without like other people. I mean, this guy is alone for 20 plus years on an island. Yeah. And then also, I think it was Amy from A-Star Reads has mentioned it to me, but this guy, things go way too smoothly for him in this book. And that was also very, So again, I DNF'd it. I got about halfway through, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I think I got halfway through and I just put it down. I don't anticipate picking it up anytime soon either. Whew. Okay, the next book was the Lola Quartet by Emily St. John Mandel. And it was okay. I enjoyed parts of it, and then I didn't enjoy a lot of other parts. But it's truly about this man. He goes home and his sister tells him his old girlfriend from high school might have given him a kid and he never knew about it. And so then it's this whole journey of him trying to figure out what happened in the past, what's happening to his girlfriend now, where's his baby. Yeah, that kind of plot. Like I said, it was okay. What did I give it? I gave it a 3, which was, I guess, looking back on it, it might be a little high. But I'm comfortable keeping it at a 3. I would recommend it to people who like those kind of mysteries. That's all I'm saying. Okay, the next book I finished was The Eyes of the Dragon by Stephen King. I actually really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought it would. It's one of King's earlier books, and the story goes that his daughter wanted to read something he wrote, but he always writes adult horror. So like for a little girl, not the best. So he wrote this beautiful YA novel. It's definitely a medieval novel. It's definitely, I guess, reminiscent of like an old fairy tale. So I guess it's good I read Grimm's fairy tales before reading this. Just made that connection. But anyway, it's really centered on 2 brothers. They're both princes and kind of like their ascension to the throne and the troubles that go into it. But it's very Stephen King-esque, and I really enjoyed it because you have characters from the Dark Tower in it, or at least one character, and it's also set in one of the potential lands that could be in the Dark Tower series. So that little tidbit really made this book for me, and you don't have to have read the Dark Tower series to get this book, but I think if you have read them, you'd enjoy this book a lot more. Okay. Ooh, okay, and then I finished Lost City Radio, and I really did enjoy this book. I thought it was really cool how not only the perspective changed throughout the book, but the timeline we were going back and forth. I just thought it was a really good book. The premise is that this woman, Nora, has been hosting the Lost City Radio for years. And this radio is trying to connect people who've been lost to each other throughout this decades-long civil war in this country. And one of the reasons Norma still does this radio and has been doing it for so long is because she actually lost her husband years and years before, and she's still trying to look for him. So she's not only giving back, but she's trying to receive some compensation for doing this radio as well. And one day this kid comes to her radio talking about the village that her husband disappeared from. And so it's this huge mystery, but it also has a lot of human conflict in it, where you're talking about the devastation of a decades-long civil war and what it does to relationships and people, and how lonely people can be as well. But it's a good book, and I would highly recommend it. All right, the second to last book I read this year is The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. So it's a mystery novel, and I believe it's Hawkins' debut novel. I might be wrong about that. But it basically follows this young woman who's recently married this guy in this insanely rich neighborhood, whose previous wife died in a mysterious way. And go figure, the wife upstairs, just saying. I thought this book was fine. I didn't think the mystery was all that enticing. I did not enjoy how it ended. I didn't enjoy the progression to the ending. And I just think it was a mystery that could have been done better. But again, it was an enjoyable read if you enjoy mystery thrillers. And then the very last book I read this month is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And I've been meaning to read this book for a very long time, but I would also put it in the category, or put it in the same category as How to Do Nothing, where it's kind of like this self-help book on how not to care, how to live your life to the fullest, and so on and so forth. I know a lot of people liked it. It was a huge phenomenon, a couple years ago, I guess. Again, it was okay. What did I give it? Oh, I guess I did give it a 3. I don't know, like I said, I think people can take things from it, but I just didn't take anything from it. All right, and that was my reading month. I read some good books, I read some bad books, and I just really need to get back into the swing of reading. I think I'm starting to. Again, it's a progression, but I just need to read or at least go back to reading things that I really, really enjoy. For example, this year, none of these books are some of the best books I read this year. At least I don't think they will be. Don't get me wrong, a lot of them were good. Again, some better than others. But they're not going on my like top books of the year list. And I believe this time last year I at least had one in that list. So that's a little bit disappointing. But that just means I'm really hopeful for next month, February, this month, schematics. And it can only get better, right? All right. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. My reluctant January wrap up, if you will. And here's hoping to an amazing February. I'll see you next time. Bye.